Hello, welcome to this edition of Digging Deeper. My name is Cheryl Peterson. I manage the rare plant conservation here at Bok Tower Gardens, and we're here in what's called the National Collection Bed area. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the National Collection and why we hold it, what it's all about, and what it does, and introduce you to a couple of plants here. We hold the National Collection of Rare Plants of Florida for a national group called the Center for Plant Conservation. We have been a participating member in the Center for Plant Conservation, or the CPC, since the mid 80s, since about 1984 85. We were one of the first members. And at that time, there were about 14 different garden institutions who participated, and now there are about 62. So it's really growing fast. And each of the member institutions, like us, we are responsible for preserving the seeds and the some plants of each of the rare plant populations found in our state. And so it's preserving the genetic diversity that are remaining in these species, because each of these species are very fast disappearing in the wild. And so the National Collection helps to preserve them for the future. So the National Collection we have here at Bok preserves all the rare plant species that are found only in Florida and nowhere else in the world. And most of the National Collection is seeds. We have several million seeds stored in the collection. And behind me is a National Collection bed area, and these are 60 growing beds that contain about 1,500 to 2,000 specimens of rare plants. Now, this area is off limits to visitors, but we do give tours for school groups or the general public or artists or researchers on occasion, because this is a working a collection that's used to help study the plants, to help understand them more, to help produce material to introduce new populations into the wild so the species can be preserved in the wild. And so it's open to youth, but off site to the general visitor. So come on in and I'll show you some plants. The reason we have plants and not just seeds as part of the collection is because some species don't have seeds that can be stored very long. And also, in this collection of growing plants, there's a lot of material, a lot of specimens that are from rescued areas. We travel throughout Florida also to rescue rare plants that are impacted by development. And if we can't collect the seeds, or in addition to the seeds, we'll get the actual plants and put them in the beds as well. And that way, that genetic material can go on to be used to conserve what's left of the species. And I'll be showing you a couple of examples of why the living component, the plants themselves, are important in the National Collection. And this is one of the species that's really important to have as living material in the National Collection. The common name of this species is Savannah's mint. And the Latin name is Dicerandra immaculata variety Savannarum. And if you look closely at the flowers, if you know anything about the mint family at all, they have a typical mint-shaped leaf or mint-shaped flower. And this was called immaculata because immaculata means spotless. And all the other plants, all the other species in this Dicerandra genus have spots in the corolla throat. This one's spotless. Latin and spotless is immaculate, so this is immaculata. That's how it got its name. And like a lot of the Dicerandras in Florida, they occur only in Florida, nowhere else in the world, only in a very small area, a specific location in Florida, and on a specific habitat type. This one happened to be found only from one small private property in South St. Lucie County on the East Coast, and it's found absolutely nowhere else in the world. Since it's on private property, it was in a subdivision that has been converted to a house. So that means if we weren't able to get these specimens growing in the collection, the species would actually have gone extinct. But because we were able to collect cuttings and seeds from that one wild population and keep the plants growing in these beds and use the seeds to preserve in the freezer storage in the national collection, we're able to preserve the species for posterity. And because of that, we've been able to study the plant. We've been able to study its chemistry. Each of the mint plants in Florida has a very unique, distinct smell and taste. It smells very strongly like a really wonderful peppermint, and there's absolutely nothing else that smells like this in the world. It's really unique. It's really an important plant for pollinators, especially the native bees. And so it's important to preserve a species like this for wildlife and for the pollinators that we all depend on. So having these plants in the national collection means that we've reproduced the wild population in the collection beds here. So this is the only place where the original population now exists, because on that private property that's now been developed. So it's extinct in the wild. However, because we've been able to preserve seeds and clone the plant through cuttings, we've been able to use this material to introduce new populations onto protected lands. So we worked with a local park that's local to the area where this natural population was found. And we've been able over the years to introduce thousands of plants. So there's probably close to 8,000 plants now in the wild, which is much larger than the original population was. So that's one of the ways that this national collection is really important, because without it being able to grow the plants here in the beds and preserve and rescue the natural population, the species would have gone extinct. So this is a nice success story for us. And so let me introduce you to another species. So this plant that you see here is called the Florida ziziphus. Its botanical name is Ziziphus salata, and Ziziphus is spelled Ziziphus. This is a species that was once thought to be extinct. It was rediscovered in the mid-80s as just a handful of very small populations. And this is one that is found just in the area around Bok Tower Gardens and nowhere else in the world. The populations were very small, and as the adult plants died, no new seedlings would come up. And even though it profusely flowered, no seeds were produced. So each of the populations, after it was rediscovered to not be extinct, they were declining. So it was a matter of, is the species going to go extinct again? Is it going to go extinct for sure? But with research, what was found was that each of the populations were too genetically identical to be able to cross within themselves. Each of the individuals was too closely related, and it's an obligate outcrosser. It needs someone who's not genetically similar to it in order to produce seeds. The good news was that each of the populations were genetically different from each other, but they were too far apart in the wild to be able to cross with each other. So the populations were gradually declining, and they had maybe 2 to 10 plants each. So it was a species that, after being rediscovered, was on its way out for good. So that's another way that these collection beds really come in handy, because what we've done over the years is clonally reproduce the plants through taking root cuttings, having them from each of the populations, having them grow, planting them in the beds. And that means that in these beds, the different genetic individuals, which are called the different genotypes, are now free to cross with each other for the very first time. And so we've been able to put clones of all the different genotypes in these collection beds, and the pollinators will cross hybridize or cross the plants. And so we were able to produce fruit here, and we can get thousands of fruit produced each year from some of these plants. And so this is effectively the only place in the world where seeds of this species is produced. I say effectively because there is one population that will produce a few seeds, but the seeds are often not viable or have really low viability, and seeds aren't produced every year. But we can have thousands of good seeds produced here every year, and that means we can store the seeds for long-term storage in the seed component of our national collection, and we can use those seeds to study the seed biology, to preserve the genotypes that would otherwise have gotten lost in the wild as adult plants die, and to produce seedlings. And we produce several seedlings of these, actually many seedlings every year, and those get used to create new populations in the wild under protection of lands. And the new populations do have the different genotypes together. So the hope is that when the plants get large enough and start flowering, they'll be able to cross freely in the wild, and then we'll have a self-sustaining population. So that's another example of how plants in the collection bed is helping to prevent the extinction of a species that would likely otherwise have gone extinct. So thank you very much for your interest and your attention. Bye-bye.